This is BBIU, BioPharma Business Intelligence Unit. We provide structured insight and strategic analysis. In a world saturated with noise, surface narratives, and politically shaped data, BBIU operates at a different level of resolution. We focus on the forces beneath events: geopolitical and geoeconomic realignment, biopharma structural dynamics, liquidity stress and financial fragility, institutional drift and epistemic erosion, the architecture of power in global systems. Our work is guided by three principles: truth, structural coherence, and verifiable inference. Every model, every report, every forecast you see here is part of the analytical framework we use to brief decision makers worldwide. If you're looking for information, there are many places to go. If you're looking for structure, welcome. Energy repricing and the closure of discount channels. A structural reading of the 2025-2026 oil shock. Executive assessment, public version. Recent developments surrounding Iran and Middle East escalation have triggered sharp moves in global oil prices. While market commentary has focused on geopolitical tension and potential supply disruption, this framing is incomplete. The current price response is not primarily driven by physical shortages. It reflects rising logistics risk, insurance repricing, optionality compression, and perception of control over critical corridors. These mechanisms align with a structural energy framework in which oil no longer behaves as a purely physical commodity, but as a macro-political control variable. Under this configuration, price action precedes disruption rather than follows it. Volatility emerges from risk transmission, not from lost barrels. Energy repricing and the closure of discount channels. A structural reading of the 2025-2026 oil shock. Executive assessment, public version. Recent developments surrounding Iran and Middle East escalation have triggered sharp moves in global oil prices. While market commentary has focused on geopolitical tension and potential supply disruption, this framing is incomplete. The current price response is not primarily driven by physical shortages. It reflects rising logistics risk, insurance repricing, optionality compression, and perception of control over critical corridors. These mechanisms align with a structural energy framework in which oil no longer behaves as a purely physical commodity, but as a macro-political control variable. Under this configuration, price action precedes disruption rather than follows it. Volatility emerges from risk transmission, not from lost barrels. A deeper force decomposition and cross-system propagation analysis is maintained under institutional access. 1. Validation of the structural projection. Core observation. Oil prices surged sharply following U.S.-Israel actions involving Iran, despite the absence of confirmed production outages. Analysts immediately cited scenarios of further upside should tensions persist or shipping routes face disruption. This confirms a central structural premise: price is responding to perceived fragility and corridor exposure, not to immediate scarcity. Structural interpretation, surface layer. Risk premia expanded rapidly. Shipping and insurance costs adjusted immediately. Market psychology reacted faster than physical flows. This behavior is consistent with an energy system driven by control of optionality rather than equilibrium supply-demand mechanics. 2. Iran in the current energy configuration. Iran is a vibration node. Iran's relevance lies less in its production volume than in its positional exposure to key transit corridors. Even limited escalation generates outsized price reactions through insurance repricing, shipment suspensions, and risk reassessment of choke points. Under an orthogonal differentiation perspective, Iran exhibits high surface legibility and high volatility sensitivity. Absorption versus exposure. The system response highlights a distinction between actors that generate volatility and actors that absorb volatility. The latter category determines system stability. 3. Asia-wide implications, surface layer. Asian importers responded by reassessing inventories, logistics routes, and short-term exposure. The dominant effect is margin compression, not access failure. This is most visible in economies whose competitiveness depends on input cost asymmetry rather than demand expansion. Annex 1, China. Discounted crude, structural dependence, and repricing risk, limited version. Starting point. China is structurally dependent on imported crude oil. Its relative advantage in recent years was not energy independence, but access to barrels priced below global benchmarks under sanction and opacity conditions. Pre-2026 configuration, high level. China's import mix included material volumes of crude sourced under discounted conditions from a small number of suppliers operating under geopolitical friction. These channels functioned as implicit cost buffers, stabilizers for refining margins, and indirect support for industrial pricing. Recent compression. Recent geopolitical developments have narrowed or disrupted multiple discounted supply channels. While aggregate import volumes remain available, the price structure of imports has shifted. This does not imply scarcity. It implies loss of distortion. Structural consequence. China now faces higher effective input costs, reduced margin flexibility, and greater exposure to global benchmark pricing. The system continues to function, but with diminished elasticity. A full quantification of discount exposure, supplier concentration, and bargaining dynamics is maintained in the institutional annex. Annex 2, South Korea. Energy Constraint State Limited Version. Starting point. South Korea is a structural importer of crude and gas. Its vulnerability is not access to supply, but rigidity in industrial configuration and exposure to benchmark-linked pricing. Structural characteristics. Refining system optimized for Middle Eastern grades. Long-term contracts and upstream stakes. Benchmark pricing exposure, Brent and Dubai. South Korea operates as a rules-based buyer, not a discount arbitrage participant. Effect of discount closure. Elsewhere. As discounted channels toward other Asian buyers compress, global price sensitivity rises, volatility transmits through benchmarks, and South Korea absorbs cost pressure without offsetting upside. Classification. South Korea remains fully supplied, but increasingly margin-constrained. This creates industrial pressure without leverage. Annex 3, Japan. High dependence, high resilience importer, limited version. Starting point. Japan is an extreme importer of crude oil. Its distinguishing feature is not lower dependence, but institutional architecture. Japan prioritizes contractual certainty, insurance and compliance, and alliance-based supply assurance. Structural positioning. Japan does not rely on discounted or opaque supply channels. Its procurement model is designed to absorb price volatility rather than exploit distortions. Relative outcome. As discount channels close elsewhere, Japan does not lose an implicit subsidy, relative stability improves, and exposure is limited to headline price and corridor risk. Alliance vector. Japan's long-cycle alignment with the United States further reduces policy shock risk and enhances predictability under energy recentralization. Annex 4, Gulf Producers and OPEC. Price defense under fiscal gravity, limited version. Starting point. Gulf producers are not constrained by reserves or capacity. Their vulnerability is fiscal. State stability depends on oil prices remaining compatible with domestic spending, transformation agendas, and fiscal break-even thresholds. Structural tension. As demand elasticity weakens and discounted demand channels close, price defense becomes mandatory, volume defense becomes destabilizing, and cohesion within OPEC Plus is strained. Short-term effect. Geopolitical escalation produces temporary price relief via risk premia. This benefit is conditional and reversible. Medium to long-term exposure. Sustained adjustment in marginal demand increases fiscal pressure, quota stress, and reliance on price defense over expansion. Oil power shifts from price making to price survival. Integrated structural conclusion public. The current oil shock is not an anomaly. It is a surface manifestation of a system transitioning away from distortion-based equilibrium. Key observations. Energy is being re-indexed from volume to control variables. Discount channels are closing unevenly across systems. Price reflects risk transmission, not shortage. The implications differ materially by country, time horizon, and industrial configuration. A full force decomposition, timing analysis, and cross-annex interaction model is available under institutional access. Disclosure boundary. This publication represents a limited public version. Quantitative exposure mapping, bargaining asymmetry metrics, and forward scenario propagation are maintained separately for institutional engagement. If your organization requires structural clarity, BBIU is available for private briefings and strategic analysis. To initiate contact, visit BioPharma Business Intelligence Unit.com and reach out through the institutional access channel.